So let me start by explaining what post-traumatic stress disorder is. And I believe this is, if you understand what PTSD is and how it's represented in our brain, then you're going to understand what attachment trauma is. Although attachment trauma is not yet a diagnosis that is found in the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, or the DSM-5, much of what I describe parallels very closely with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm just going to be very simple, and forgive me if I gloss over it too much. But PTSD is a trauma disorder that occurs when a person endures trauma that is too big, too large for them to manage psychologically. Every person has a different resilience level. Every person can manage a certain amount of trauma before the brain, and it has this independent function, I call it a circuit breaker, will realize that this is too difficult to manage psychologically and feels that if it does not shut off the conscious experience of the trauma, that it will fall apart. Now, of course, the brain and what we know as the mind is very difficult to quantify, but it'll suffice to say that when a person is traumatized and it's just too big for them to deal with, psychological mechanisms go into effect where that trauma is encapsulated, it's put into a compartment, and it is moved to a different part of the brain that houses our normal memories. In other words, our typical memories are stored in various places in our cerebral cortex, which is the outermost part of our brain in which we think, in which we identify as ourselves, in which our personality exists, in which we feel distinctly human. It is the vast area of our brain that actually makes us human. Most mammals either do not have a very distinct or developed cerebral cortex, or they don't have it at all. But when the memories are so intensely dangerous as the mind or the brain experiences it, it takes that material, it locks it up into a little compartment, and it moves it to the center of our brain in a small little almond-shaped section called the amygdala. The amygdala stores traumatic memories, but it stores them not in language. It stores them in what I consider HD video files that have no dialogue. It cannot be accessed by conscious mind and through memory. Most of our trauma that did not exceed the level at which the circuit breaker was flipped, it is stored in our cerebral cortex in many areas of our brain. And we can think about it, we can get to it, and we can analyze and problem solve because that information is accessible. But the trauma memory is in a place of the brain that is not connected to our conscious thought. Now, the brain has a very rudimentary design. Evolution is very interesting. Evolution was not designed by a bunch of mechanical engineers. It just kind of happened. And there's a flaw in the design of what I call the trauma memory encapsulation process. So it is a positive element of our mind, our brain, that if we experience too much trauma, we can package that up and put it in a place where we don't have to remember it because we are not able to survive that experience. So one could say that is good, that is positive. We would fall apart, we would not be able to cope, we might be too anxious or too depressed, we might be suicidal. So that's good. That's good that we have a safety mechanism. But the fatal flaw of the system is there's no mechanism that tells the amygdala that it's ready to process that information and release it back into our conscious mind. And this is all discussed in detail, as I said before, in my 3-hour training, Healing the Trauma Child, the Inner Trauma Child. But the part that is relevant to this training is dreams and dream analysis. Everyone knows, especially Sigmund Freud and the followers of Sigmund Freud, is that dreams are a powerful force in our psychological being. They represent our past, our present, and our future. And depending on your psychological training, your theoretical orientation, or just your preferences, you might ascribe a lot more to dreams or a lot less. But it is crucial to the implementation of SLED treatment that we understand trauma integration through the analysis of dreams.